Hello and welcome to our program. After a historic meeting between Kim Jong-un and Trump at the DMZ, both Pyongyang and Washington are showing more signs of flexibility in negotiations. What are some of Washington's corresponding measures for North Korea? We are going to examine these issues on this week's Peace and Prosperity.
North Korea and the U.S. have been showing signs that they are willing to take a more flexible approach since the impromptu meeting between their leaders at the DMZ, where they agreed to resume working-level negotiations. North Korea's former top nuclear negotiator Kim Jong-chul, who headed the United Front Department, is known as a longtime hawk who came off as inscrutable and arrogant, according to a Washington Post report citing U.S. officials. U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, who was notably absent from the latest Kim-Trump encounter, is viewed as a notorious hawk on North Korea. With Pompeo asserting more influence, there has been speculation that Washington may show more flexibility in negotiations with Pyongyang. Meanwhile, the New York Times reported that the Trump administration is considering a nuclear freeze deal with North Korea, taking a step back from its previous all-or-nothing approach. U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun said the corresponding measures the U.S. may take include humanitarian aid, people-to-people exchanges, and setting up liaison offices. Some expect the Trump administration will focus on security guarantees rather than sanctions relief in future talks. In the meantime, the U.S. State Department has once again stressed that final, fully verified denuclearization remains its final goal with dealing with North Korea. But with both sides showing signs of flexibility, it remains to be seen how working-level talks will go forward.
For today's discussions, we have Dr. Kim Jina, Research Fellow at KAIDA, Korea Institute for Defense Analyses. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Many issues we're going to examine. The first question is the change of the teams in negotiation between Washington and Pyongyang.
Yeah.
It has been reported that the Kim Jong-chul and his members belong to the United Front Department of North Korean government has been replaced by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. How do you read this change?
I think it is natural course of action because in the past years, actually, the foreign ministry took the charge in handling all these nuclear issues. And they led the discussions with the U.S. For example, Kang Seok-ju during the first nuclear crisis, and Kim Gae-gon during the second nuclear crisis. They all belong to the foreign ministry. So I think it is quite a natural thing, because the year 2018 was a very unique case, because the heads of the all intelligence agencies got together and utilized the existing channels.
Right.
The Seo-hoon and Kim Jong-chul and Pompeo, they were the key players.
Right, not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Right, and especially inter-Korean dialogue was like a springboard, if you will, to move on to the next step of having discussions between the U.S. and the DPRK. So I think that's why the United Front Department was leading the whole discussion, actually. But we are in a new situation, and the DPRK is trying to restaff the negotiation team. So that's why I think we are back in the game, doing the things in a traditional way.
The key word for today's discussion is, of course, the corresponding measures between Washington and Pyongyang. It used to be thought that the corresponding measure between Pyongyang and Washington would be Washington giving North Korea sanction reliefs in exchange for Pyongyang giving Washington verifiable and meaningful steps toward denuclearization. But it seems like the corresponding measures have been changed to include security guarantees by Washington for North Korea. Do you believe this analysis?
Well, the U.S. and South Korea mentioned that the next negotiation will be very comprehensive negotiation. It means that not only denuclearization issues, but other issues related to the three pillars of the Singapore Agreement will be also discussed at the same time. So definitely security guarantee will be one of the issues on the table. That's quite natural. And we have to also understand that the US government is currently trying to push North Korea to dismantle all WMD program in the north. And that creates some kind of dilemma for the leadership in Pyongyang. So security guarantee issue is a very critical one for the north. So it has to be discussed anyway. So I do believe that's why Russia and other countries are still arguing that we have to understand legitimate concerns of the DPRK.
Okay, that's very interesting analogy of history. Okay. Examples of security guarantees that were discussed at the Hanoi summit include setting up a U.S. liaison office in Pyongyang and formally declaring the end of the Korean War. How would a liaison office be considered a security assurance? We asked an expert to weigh in on this issue.
연락사무소 제안을 한다라는 것은 관계 정상화를 위한 첫 외교 조치를 서로 하자라고 이제 제안한 것으로 봐야 되고, 이것은 비핵화에 상응하는 어떤 관계 정상화 조치로 볼 수 있겠죠. 최종적으로는 뭐 국교 수립을 하게 되는데, 이 국교 수립을 한다는 건 서로 적대적이지 않고 외교적인 문제를 풀어가면서 살겠다라는 것을 사실상 어떻게 보면 확약하는 거기 때문에 중요한 안전 보장에 해당되는 조치라고 볼 수 있고, 그 외에 뭐 대북 제재를 해제한다든가 경제 지원을 한다든가 경제 협력 관계를 갖는다든가 이런 부분들도 사실상은 비군사적인 안전 보장 조치에 해당된다, 이렇게 볼 수 있겠죠.
Dr. Kim, what's your take on Dr. Hong's comment that it might include more than just opening up a liaison office in Pyongyang? What else can be negotiated at the working level negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington?
Well, I think setting up a liaison office is just setting up a mechanism to continue a dialogue between the two sides, because it provides some venue or platform to continue a dialogue at the working level. So that's the starting point, I believe. At this point, the sanctions lifting is not an option because the US government cannot unilaterally decide that kind of change. So other things that I can think of is perhaps removing North Korea from the list of states sponsoring terrorism, or providing some kind of humanitarian aid to North Korea in some kind of exchange, people-to-people exchange.
But no sanction relief, even partial ones, at this point?
Not before North Korea takes practical steps toward the denuclearization.
Okay, everything relates to North Korea actually taking concrete steps related to denuclearization. Right? That's the key word.
Yes.
In fact, the idea of security guarantees was also brought up by President Moon Jae-in during his speech at the DMZ meetup. Here's a short clip.
남북에 이어 북미 간에도 문서상의 서명은 아니지만 사실상의 행동으로 적대 관계의 종식과 새로운 평화 시대의 본격적인 시작을 선언했다고 말할 수 있을 것입니다.
Let me engage in self-promotion as an expert on North Korea and inter-Korean affairs as well. And I said in my own appearance in the news program that I do not personally agree with what President Moon Jae-in said of the end of hostility between United States and North Korea. What's your take on President Moon Jae-in's remark?
Well, at least at the track 2 level, we had this idea that perhaps non-binding peace declaration can be a better option than having a formal end-of-war declaration.
Non-binding peace declaration?
Yes.
Just expressing intention to move forward?
Just if we say something like we don't have hostility, then we can give a meaning to this kind of remark afterwards. Right.
But there was already said in the 2005 September 19th joint statement of a six-party talks.
The reason why we are thinking about this kind of a smooth transition to the next step is because we want to keep China out of this dialogue, and we want to prevent any disputes related to alliance issues, including UNC, from arising. Right. So that that's kind of tactic that we need to move on to the next step. That's why I think President Moon was trying to say that we have a de facto end of war situation.
All right. What about the position of North Korean leadership? Would the security guarantee, or as you said, that the declaration of end of hostility and intentions to move towards joint peace, would they satisfy Kim Jong-un without any kind of sanction relief?
Well, I think sanctions relief can be automatically possible once North Korea takes practical steps toward the denuclearization. It comes naturally. But when it comes to security guarantee, that's something that North Korea should gain from negotiation. It's going to be a very tough one with the U.S. So I think the leadership in Pyongyang wants to have a practical measures to guarantee its security in order to move forward. Because giving up every weapon system in the north is, at least at this point, a non-starter for the leadership in Pyongyang. So I think North Korea wants some kind of practical measures instead of smalling measures.
I see. Okay. Let's now shift gears to talk about the action that North Korea needs to take. Washington has insisted on North Korea's FFVD, or final and fully verified denuclearization. But is it likely to take a more flexible approach towards denuclearization following the Kim-Trump meeting at the DMZ? Here's more on the story.
Final, fully verified denuclearization, or FFVD, has remained Washington's goal in dealing with Pyongyang. The term first appeared in July 2018, ahead of U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's visit to the North. It marked a departure from the previous U.S. demand for complete, verifiable, irreversible dismantlement, or CVID. Coined in 2003 during U.S. talks with Libya, CVID involves the concept of denuclearization first, rewards after, where dismantlement and verification take place before rewards are given. However, North Korea strongly opposed a CVID demand, saying the term irreversible made it seem like a defeated nation and is tantamount to unilateral disarmament. In response, the U.S. adopted a softer stance of FFVD and stopped using the term CVID altogether in October last year. The wording has changed, but the message remains virtually the same. U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun told reporters in an off-the-record briefing on their way back to Washington from South Korea that the U.S. wanted a complete freeze of North Korea's weapons of mass destruction, according to U.S.-based news website Axios. The report has prompted speculation that while the U.S. will still pursue FFVD, it has set an interim goal of freezing North Korea's WMD programs. Some suggest Washington might have partially accepted Pyongyang's demand for a phased, step-by-step deal. But others express concerns over a possible shift in Washington's position, claiming a nuclear freeze deal amounts to a tacit recognition that North Korea is a nuclear state. From CVID and FFVD to a nuclear freeze, attention is now turning to what approach the U.S. will take in working-level negotiations.
Now, we know that there was a meetup between Mr. Lee Do-hoon, Special Representative for Security and Peace on the Korean Peninsula for South Korean government, and Stephen Biegun, the Special Representative for North Korea for the Trump administration in Europe. What do you make of this meeting between Mr. Biegun and Mr. Lee?
There's always been an effort to have a policy coordination between the two allies. I think this is part of that kind of efforts. And Mr. Bigon's visit to European countries was already planned in advance, and especially Belgium and Germany are the current non-permanent members of the UN Security Council. So it is possible that Mr. Bigon will explain US positions on the North Korea issues, and possibly it is possible that he can also discuss the timing of the lifted sanctions and the role of the UN in the future. So I think it can be a practical meeting among many, not just between the two.
I see. U.S. media outlets have reported that the U.S. might settle for nuclear freeze of North Korea as opposed to dismantlement or denuclearization. To take a deep dive on this issue, we'll connect with Mr. Ralph Kosa, President Emeritus at the Pacific Forum CSIS, a Honolulu-based foreign policy research institute. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Looking forward to our chat.
Some in Washington are saying a more realistic approach involving small deals is needed in dealing with North Korea rather than an all-in-one option. What do you make of this argument?
Well, I think you need both. I think that you need a step-by-step approach, but first you have to have agreement on the overall objective. So you need to have a grand bargain, and then you need to have step-by-step to get from here to there.
Recent reports suggest that the Trump administration could negotiate a nuclear freeze with Pyongyang instead of complete disarmament. Is this strategy realistic?
Yeah, I think, the first step in making things better is to stop making them worse. So if you can have a real freeze, but a real freeze requires verification. A real freeze is not just a halt in testing, which is easy to see, but a halt in production, a halt in R&D, and this type of thing, I think, would be almost impossible to verify without complete North Korean cooperation.
Okay, thank you for your joining us today.
Okay.
There was Mr. Ralph Kosa from the Pacific Forum CSIS in Hawaii. What's your take on Mr. Kosa's remarks?
Well, I think we have to understand why Mr. Bigon and others mentioned the freeze options. Well, his intention was to say that we are going to unlock the talk by starting from freezing the program in the north. So it's going to be the entry of the negotiation, not the end state of the negotiation. And he was very clear about that. Before his departure to Europe, he also mentioned FFVD very clearly. And Mr. President Trump also mentioned in his talk with Prime Minister Theresa May in UK, he also mentioned FFVD clearly. So the goal has not changed, I believe. Well, we tend to focus sometimes on specific words out of the context. I think that's not a good idea. And I think I have mentioned it before, but I think the dismantlement of North Korea's WMD entirely is a bipartisan request in the U.S. And in order to pass any agreement between the U.S. and the DPRK by the Congress, there needs to be some support for the outcome of the negotiation. I think freeze, that's not going to be the option that's
not going to be the option.
the President Trump can offer. That's not enough.
Okay. North Koreans paid tribute to the late leader Kim Il-sung on July 8th, the semi-centennial anniversary of his death. Making the occasion, North Korea's state-run newspaper 노동신문 said in its editorial that the country's strategic status has changed. Here's a short clip on how North Korea commemorated its founder's death.
With the sound of a siren, North Koreans observed a moment of silence to mark the 25th anniversary of founder Kim Il-sung's death. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun to pay tribute to his grandfather.
경야는 최고 용도자동 측에서는 참가자들과 함께 위대한 수리용 김일성 동지와 위대한 용도자 김정일 동지 입상을 우러러 숭고한 경의를 표시하시었습니다.
The regime held a commemorative event on a scale unseen in years, in line with its tradition of having grander celebrations on every 5th or 10th anniversary. The official ceremony was attended by Kim as well as his key aides, including his sister, Kim Jina, and First Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee.
존경하는 최고 영주자 김정은 동지를 정치 사상적으로 목숨으로 경결히 옹이하며 일편단심 충직하게 받들어 나가야 하겠습니다.
The participants pledged their continued loyalty to the young leader and reiterated their commitment to building an economic powerhouse.
So, Dr. Kim, let me reiterate what we heard from editorial of Nodong Shinmun. It said that the strategic status of the Republic, North Korea, has fundamentally changed. What does it imply? Is there any kind of secret consensus between Mr. Kim and Mr. President Donald Trump in DMZ meeting that North Korea will be given kind of freeze by the United States?
Well, it is not the first time that North Korea mentioned the strategic status. That was mentioned many times before. North Korea argued that its strategic status has changed in the international society. Before North Korea made a strategic decision focusing more on economic development, North Korea tended to mention its status as a nuclear weapons state. But these days, I kind of think that North Korea is trying to explain that its strategic value to neighboring countries and the U.S. has changed. By increasing its nuclear deterrence, it can now have a talk with the U.S. and talk with the neighboring countries. And for example, the last day of last year, in 2018, North Korea's media, Nodong Shinmun, also mentioned that North Korea now have talks with the U.S., South Korea, and China because of the strategic status has changed. So North Korea is by saying so, North Korea says that, well, North Korea's strategic value to other countries has increased. I think we should understand.
North Korea has become real nuclear power state?
No, I don't think so. It just want to focus and emphasize the strategic value to other countries.
I see. My last question would put the nuclear North Korea issue in a broad context. It is no secret that there is a diplomatic row between Seoul and Tokyo these days, and many people are concerned about its likely implications or impacts on dealing with nuclear North Korea. What's your ideas about this new development?
Well, South Korea's position is to separate historical issues from security issues. That's why we encouraged Japan to have a constructive role in denuclearization of the North. But now we have a trade dispute, and the key issue is the export control. Now South Korea is considering to take this case to WTO. That means Japanese government has to think about the logic to justify imposing protective measures in the name of security matters, national security matters.
Or dealing with the nuclear missile capability and threats of North Korea. Right?
Yeah, that can be part of its logic, and
Right.
we'll continue possibly to see the same pattern in the future. So we have to be prepared for that.
I see. All right, as always, it was a great pleasure to have you and share with you the insights and analysis on North Korea. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
With U.S.-North Korea working level talks resuming soon, we are seeing a lot of news coverage about it. Here are the latest news updates.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is less convinced Washington would take military action, believing U.S. President Donald Trump is, quote, different. That's according to Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Intelligence and Research, Ellen McCarthy. In an interview with CBS News, McCarthy said she can't pinpoint whether Kim likes or dislikes Trump, but he may be viewing Trump differently from past American presidents. She added that based on her team's understanding of the media and what Kim has said, the North Korean leader believes the U.S. is looking for regime change, but not through military action. South Korea's foreign ministry says the UN Security Council's North Korea Sanctions Committee recently approved Seoul's request to destroy a ship being held in South Korea for illegal ship-to-ship transfers of oil products to the north. The ship has been held in Pyeongtaek since December 2017, and Seoul asked for the UN's approval to scrap the vessel in mid-May. This is the first time that a ship is being disposed of for violating UN sanctions. The ministry says the case will send a clear message to the international community that such violations can result in such measures.
We will discuss more about this matter next week. And that's all we have for you today. Thanks for watching.